Yeah. Rich and Banks and I were in a group called Hair Club for Men. Not the hair club, not the hair club for men, just hair club. And what that is anytime there is a production of the musical Hair within a 100-mile radius of Los Angeles, we go see it. Whether it's a high school production or a college production or a national tour or anything. So we've seen a couple dozen productions of the musical Hair.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. We're getting off the Springsteen train today, and we're going to talk music, magic, podcasting, entertainment. We have Handsome Jack joining us today. And just Jack, I am so thrilled that you said you would join me. In case the audience has not heard of your fabulous career.
In case.
Tell the audience a little about yourself, my friend.
I am, as you hinted at in your intro, I'm a magician. And I guess that sums it up. I'm a magician, and I guess the way you found me is I'm have been on several episodes of Penn Jillette's Penn Sunday School. And I'd written a book about Penn and Teller, and you had bought the book and you'd heard me on the podcast and thought, well, we can make fun of this guy if I bring him on the podcast. So there I am.
Well, yeah, I was reading your official bio, and you actually got a little skins on the wall. You've done pretty well for yourself, haven't you?
I have. Well, here's the interesting thing. Maybe it's not interesting. It's mildly interesting to me. Is I never wanted to be a magician.
Okay.
It was a hobby that took over my life. I had no desire to do it full time or professionally. I was working for, 20 years or so. I did almost any job you could think of in film, TV, radio, and theater. Mm-hmm. And magic was a hobby, and slowly over time, magic took over my life, and I fought it. I did not want to do it professionally and full time, and it like a giant snowball rolling down a hill, it just eventually consumed my life. And after about 10 years, I had to admit, I guess I'm a magician. But
like, holy crap, how did this happen?
Well, yeah, and that's the interesting thing is my fallback plan was not being able to repair cars or accounting. My fallback plan was card tricks.
Okay.
So if this theater career doesn't work out, I always got card tricks. I mean, how strange and improbable is that?
Yeah, that's great. Well, we were talking about before I recorded, I am not even an amateur magician. I'm fascinated by, first off, the discipline for people to, learn sleight of hand and to do all the work it has to do this trick. And I also, because one of the things Bruce says in his Broadway show is he said, he had a magic trick, of convincing the audience that he was different than he was. Yeah. So I'm just fascinated by it that, and I think anytime you go into entertainment, it's feast or famine sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. How do you, I have a good buddy who is an artist, and he That's all he's ever wanted to be. He said from the moment he could pick up a crayon, that's knew he ever wanted to be. And he never had a fallback, as you know, you talked about it. He was just, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to figure out how to make a living on it.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah. Well, I always like to start at the beginning. So talk about, where did you grow up and what kind of music did your family listen to?
Well, I'm gonna, respond to something you said before I
Sure,
answer that.
please,
And
please.
that is,
I love tangents.
well, this is really what you're saying. You talked about, the discipline to do magic. And the thing that I compare magic to most often
Mhm.
is music, in that it takes the same kind of discipline and dedication and time that music does.
Right.
I taught for a few years, I taught magic at USC for the theater department, actually. It was an elective class. It was open to all majors, not just theater students. And so I got, engineers and students of all kinds. And I would tell them at the beginning of the semester, I would say magic is a lot like music. I mean, imagine, for those of you that don't play music, and this was a piano course,
Mhm.
how good do you think you would be at playing the piano at the end of this semester?
Right.
Well, that's basically how good at magic you're going to be at the end of the semester. You can learn to plink out a song fairly quickly, but you're not going out on the road at the end of 4 months. And magic is kind of the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And and there's so much diversity in the magic. And one of the things that when people, they'll ask me like, oh boy, you really like this show, Fool Us. And I go, yeah, because just the joy and of, it seems that Penn and Teller honestly admire most of the time the act,
Yeah.
the person. They genuinely, have good things to say. They talk about it. And there's so many reality shows that are all about,
Yeah.
cutting people down and making it. And
Yeah.
there seems to be a celebration of what's, can be fun.
And when they say nice things to the performers, most of the time they mean it.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I have that's yeah, as we were talking about, I listened to Matt Donnelly behind the scenes of that, and he will talk about every once in a while, like, yeah, this did not go as well. We cleaned it up for TV because there was a lot of argument about, no, you didn't know how we do it. Yes, I did. And so it's fun. But you did fool them, didn't you?
I did indeed fool them. In fact, I was the first American to fool them. They'd done one season of the show in the UK.
Right.
And when they did the first American season, I shot the first day of shooting, and I was the only one who fooled them that day. And so I was the first American to fool them. Although my episode ended up airing, halfway through the season because they rearranged.
Right.
Rearranged.
Yeah, I can just remember though that the you handing them the prop, and they went, oh, wait a minute, if so which you had, they had said you guys are friends, you knew them, and so I think they get a special joy out of when they see one of their buddies and they know, okay, this is going to be fun.
And they have no idea who's ever is going to be on the show.
Right.
And they've had, and because the magic world is small, they know a lot of the people. A lot of people on the show, they either have met them briefly or casual, or actually good friends with them. But that doesn't mean, they're going to, go easy on you, or if you know them, you have a leg up, because many of their friends who've been on the show, have walked away trophyless, as we say.
Absolutely. Well, very nice. All right. Well, let's go. You're growing up. What was it? A musical family?
Well, it was indeed a very non-musical family.
Okay.
I grew up in a little tiny little town in Montana many years ago. I'm an old man now. But there was, in this tiny little town, we grew up with no FM radio, no record stores, no music venues for a 200-mile radius. So seeing live music was something that never happened, other than in school. I played the baritone horn in band in junior high and high school, and it was not
Nice.
very good, not very good. But it was a chance to hear music live when, like I said, there were no opportunities. There was no such thing as garage bands or kids forming a band in my little town. I don't know. I only knew one kid who was all serious about music, and he ended up, he's a professional magician now.
Oh,
And he tours around, and every once in a while I'll see, oh, Mitch is in wherever, playing. But so there's not like, and like I said, no concerts to go see, no FM radio, no nothing.
did
Um,
your did your parents like music? Did they
not
like did
not
they have
not
us?
not, not particularly.
Okay.
And so I grew up. I grew up. Uh, all I was really exposed to was top 40, and this was in I was in high school in the 70s.
So I graduated high school in 77.
I graduated in 1980, so
Okay.
we're
So yeah, so
yeah,
we're pretty close. And
we
yes,
know the era.
I talk about that all the time that um you know the we had an FM station in Lake Charles, Louisiana, where I grew up, but that that was all the kids that were into drugs listened to FM
Yeah,
stations, right? I
yeah,
was the square little Baptist kid in listening to top 40.
yeah.
And you kind of got a little bit of taste of everything back then.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I listening to Casey Kasem do the
Oh,
American Top 40 countdown. That was a huge deal. And so, um, and that was all I knew. It wasn't until I got to college I started getting exposed to other kinds of music.
where'd you go to school?
Um, I went to got my bachelor's at Montana State University in Bozeman,
Okay.
and so occasionally they would have bands come through and there were concerts, but I didn't go to a lot of concerts. And the groups that came to Montana State were not, the Rolling Stones didn't come through, for example. It was, we would get groups like, Quarter Flash came through once, I think. And I'm trying to remember who else. I can't even remember. Maybe
Well,
REO Speedwagon, maybe.
when I was there in Lake Charles, got a lot of country. I remember Chris Christopherson and Rita Coolidge,
Oh, wow.
Willie Nelson a couple of times, saw John Denver. And it was, I did tell though, Harry Chapin showed up, and
Okay.
that was kind of cool. It was a storm and his band couldn't make it. So it was just him and his guitar playing. It felt like 3 hours, and that was a pretty cool thing. Like I was like, oh, I was happy I kind of got to check that out before his passing. So yeah, that's good. So um now that you're in college, is your palette expanding? Like, are you
Well,
discovering?
yeah, yeah, and I also, because I studied in theater in college.
Okay.
Actually, my major was motion picture production, but I did a lot of theater. I got a minor in theater, and so I
Okay.
did a lot of plays and a lot of musicals, and that's when I started directing as well. Um, and so I got very interested in musical theater. I'm still very interested in musical theater. I've got a couple of friends, um, Stephen Banks, who some people know as Billy the Mime. That'll
Okay.
mean nothing to most of you, but there'll be maybe a few listeners out there who've heard of Billy the Mime. Stephen Banks is a writer. He's written a lot of animation. He was the head writer for SpongeBob SquarePants
Oh,
for a while.
that's
Interesting guy.
impressive.
He and another friend, a guy named Rich Nathanson, who I know through Penn Jillette.
Yeah.
Rich and Banks and I were in a group called Hair Club for Men. Not the Hair Club, not the Hair Club for Men, just Hair
The
Club for
club
Men.
fit, yes.
And what that is anytime there is a production of the musical Hair within a 100-mile radius of Los Angeles, we go see it. Whether it's a high school production or a college production or a national tour or anything. So we've seen a couple dozen productions of the musical Hair.
I think that is awesome.
Yeah.
You know,
And
yeah. I mean, there's deadheads, right, that go, and then obviously my audience, there are people that travel to see Springsteen when he's touring. This is the first I've heard of Hair.
yeah.
That's pretty cool.
And the thing that's kind of interesting about that is it's almost impossible not almost impossible, I'll say very difficult to do
Yeah.
a good production of Hair. It's a
Okay.
really hard show for a number of reasons. One is the music is fantastic, but difficult, and you need a lot of great singers. Um, Capturing that era, the late 60s, the Vietnam War era, is very difficult. Just capturing the vibe of that and the design of that, like genuine hippie clothes of that era. It's easy to just not really get it right. And the choreography, everything about it. Plus, the show has no plot. It's got no plot. It's weirdly episodic and strange, and it's got topical references. So of the 24 productions or so that we've seen, maybe 3 of them have been good, you know.
Why do you think people keep doing it if it's that difficult to do?
Well, I think people don't know the challenge they're in for.
Okay.
Plus, it's just a great
Hmm.
musical. Although I don't know if this is an indicator for what's coming, but this past year, UCLA was scheduled to do a production, and so
Hmm.
of course the 3 of us were very excited about that, and the production was canceled because the student said, "We're not doing that racist, sexist play."
Oh, wow.
Plus, and this was amazing, it makes the military look bad. It's very I get not disrespectful to the military. And it is the least sexist, least racist play,
Yeah.
ever written. It is the opposite of racist and sexist. But you have to put it in context, and you have to dive into it and really understand um, uh, what it's about and what it's getting at. And the fact that to say it puts the military in a negative light. Well, it puts up indiscriminately carpet bombing,
Yes.
civilians in a negative light. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That it is a very different time. That's hilarious. So you you talked to me a little bit. We exchanged a few emails and back, and so you have 3 or 4 bands you're pretty
Yeah.
passionate about,
Well,
right?
yes, I'm somebody who, if I like a band, I have all of their albums. And
Okay.
so when you asked if I might be interested in being this podcast, I thought, well, who is the musician I could talk about? And I thought, well, it's got to be somebody where I own every one of their albums, and it's got to be somebody where I think I have something to say about them, because there's many groups where I have a lot of their albums. And so the people I narrowed it down to was, well, I said the Roaches, and I
Yes.
love the Roaches. And what's funny about that is you said you love their Christmas album.
Yes.
And I'm not really into Christmas music. I thought I'll take a look at their Christmas album. I went to my Roaches,
Yeah.
area of iTunes. Their Christmas album was actually the only album theirs that I don't have. So
Wow, that's
I,
hilarious.
so I bought their Christmas album because I thought I can't have a hole in.
Yeah.
So I bought their Christmas album, and I don't like Christmas music, so I'll
Right.
probably only ever listen to it once. But I've got not only all the Roaches albums, I've got all the various combinations, because the 3 sisters, recorded
Yeah.
albums in various combinations, like these 2 sisters or those 2 sisters or whatever. But I love the Roaches. Little story about the Roaches. I didn't pick the Roaches. We're not going to be talking about the Roaches, but I
Okay.
want to tell a little story about the Roaches.
Please do.
Back in this would have been in the late 70s, I'm pretty sure, like 78 or so. I don't know when for sure.
Yeah.
In an era when a lot of the music on Saturday Night Live was not great. I mean, they had some fantastic musicians, but every once in a while they'd have a lot of clunkers.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really into like punk or anything. I never really did get into punk. I grew to appreciate it somewhat.
Okay.
But I never really got into punk. I'm just, it was all those years in, Montana growing up,
Yeah.
listening to Styx and
Yes.
Meatloaf,
Yes.
that
Kansas.
Styx
Dust
and
in the
Meatloaf
wind.
and
Yes.
and
Yes.
Toto, and Billy Joel.
Right.
Punk was never going to sink its claws into me. So I'm pretty sure it was Buck Henry, the host, and I love Buck Henry, and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the Roaches." I thought, the Roaches, oh God, this is going to be a punk band. Oh
Yes.
God, the Roaches. And then it cuts to these 3 women, and one of them is wearing like, thrift store, clothes. Another's wearing like a I think a football jersey. Another one's wearing like an army jacket. I thought, oh
Yeah.
my God, this is gonna be awful. And then they broke into their a cappella version of the Hallelujah chorus from Handel's Messiah.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my God, what is this? And they won me over instantly. And I've been a huge fan ever since.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, when I talk about the Christmas album, the two songs that I love the most, and they're all good, but I love their Hallelujah chorus and their A Son Is Given, right? The from
Yeah.
Handel's was, both of those songs. And those will be on our rotation during the holiday. Yeah, great harmony. And I've never taken the time to go explore some other albums, so I should,
Yeah.
because
You
their
know what?
harmony is amazing.
I'll tell you one thing to look up. And for those of you who don't know the Roaches, it's not Roach as in the insect, it's their last name, and it's spelled
Correct.
Roche,
Yes.
the Roaches. So that's why. But I heard Roaches and of course thought the
Yeah,
worst.
sure.
So they most of their albums were the three of them. It's Maggie and Terry and Suzy Roach. But the first album they put out was two of the sisters. And I'm looking up the album right now. It'll take me a second to pull it up.
Okay.
To get the name of the album. Here we go. The first one they put out was just Maggie and Terry, two of the sisters. And the album is called Seductive Reasoning. It was 1975. And there's a song on there called West Virginia.
Okay.
So, track down West Virginia. I'm sure you can find it on YouTube.
Okay.
West Virginia from the album Seductive Reasoning by Maggie and Terry. Maggie and Terry Roach. And this song reminds me a little bit of early Ricky Lee Jones, actually. It's the kind of song Ricky Lee Jones would have written and recorded, I think.
Okay.
All right. But I didn't pick the Roaches. Another band I considered was 10,000 Maniacs, because I love 10,000 Maniacs, particularly the Natalie Merchant years. And interestingly enough, I love Natalie Merchant. I love every album she recorded with 10,000 Maniacs. I don't like any of her solo albums.
Why do you think that is?
Well, because they're all overly sincere.
Okay.
They're just very, very sincere, and they all kind of sound the same to me. Whereas there's a real sort of joy to a lot of the 10,000 Maniacs. No, even if the subject was like child abuse, it was a song you wanted to get up and dance to,
right?
And there's none of that in her solo work. I mean, she has recorded some songs I like on her solo work, but we didn't. I didn't pick 10,000 Maniacs. I wanted desperately to talk about Tom Waits.
Yes.
Who is, oh my God, there was like a 3-year period where all I listened to was Tom Waits.
Wow.
I told a friend of mine that once. I said, all I've been listening to for like last 3 years is Tom Waits. He said, whoa, you should eat a salad. And because as much as I love about Tom Waits, I didn't know that I could talk about him as deeply and as intelligently as I would have liked.
Okay.
I will just say Tom Waits is the greatest. And if you're not that familiar with him, I'd say do a deep dive. My advice is start with like his first 6 albums, because he really grows and evolves as an artist. And you'll either really, really like the weird areas that he gets into later in his career, or he'll leave you behind. And that's okay. You don't have to like everything someone does. Right. Because a lot of his later music is not for me. As much as I want to love it, he's into territories that I just can't follow, because he's kind of, a musical genius and doing his own amazing singular thing. But I thought the person I could talk to, who was the first musician that I really got obsessed with, was Elton John.
Okay.
Because I think Elton John not only was my first obsession, there's a lot to say about Elton John, and a lot of interesting things when you examine his career and his music, I think.
So I'm often asked, on these little Twitter or Facebook, someone like, oh, what was your first album you bought with your own money? And mine was an Elton John Greatest Hits CD. Oh. I mean, no, 8-track, right? The 8-track. So yeah, absolutely. growing up in the 70s that, he was, you just heard him on the radio all the time. And I, and all the pop hits and just everything amazing about him. So when did you first hear him, and what about his music spoke to you?
Um, I'm not sure when I first heard him or even what songs I first heard, but this would have been in the early 70s,
Right.
when he has an amazing 6-year run. I'm going to pull up my iTunes so I can
Okay.
get these statistics correct. But from 1970 to
Mhm.
1976, depending on how you count, it's depending on whether you count the live albums, because he recorded 2 live albums,
Yeah.
and he also released 3 double albums. And it depends on if you count a double album as 1 record or 2. But depending on how you count, from 1970 to 1976, he recorded 10 or 14 albums of music, and every one of them is a masterpiece. Like I say, 2 of them
Yeah.
are live albums, so you might not count those. But from 1970 to 1976, he recorded his album called Elton John, which
Right.
in the first cut on Elton John is Your Song, which
Yes.
was, that monster, Your Song. Then he did Tumbleweed Connection, then Madman Across the Water, then a live album, then Honky Chateau, then Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player, which is all just great pop tunes. Then the, amazing double album, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, then Caribou, then Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboys, then Rock of the Westies, and then Blue Moves, another double album. All of that from 70 to 76, and every one of them is fantastic. And then his next album, 2 years later in 1978, was A Single Man. And from then on, since 1978, he has alternated between albums that have 2 or 3 songs that are okay to albums that are terrible. It's like,
Yeah.
there's a couple songs on this one I like. Oh, this album's terrible. I like 2 songs on this album. This one's terrible. He's been writing the same perfume commercial jingle over and over and over again for 30 years now. And after that burst of creativity in the 70s, I find both those things mind-boggling. How could he write so much amazing, mind-blowing, hard-hitting rock music
Yeah.
for 6 years? And how could he have sort of lost it so completely ever since then?
And to throw it back to Tom Waits, right?
Mhm.
He, as an artist, kept growing and kept stretching. And
Mhm.
you said you may not even like some of the things he's doing, but you recognize he's trying to grow as an artist and try to, expand new songs.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting. I do think that is a hell of a run.
Yeah.
And as I said, I remember hearing him on the radio all the time, just in this such enjoyable music, everything from Your Song to
Mhm.
poppy Crocodile Rock.
Yeah.
I can remember hearing that on the radio
Yeah.
when I was with my parents. So
Yeah.
just everything.
I think that Crocodile Rock is from his 1973 album, Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano
Yeah.
Player. And I think that is probably the first music of his I heard for the songs from that album, which is
Yeah.
Daniel, is a wonderful song called Teacher, I Need You, which is about having a crush on your teacher. The Crocodile Rock's on there. Yeah, this great, shit-kicking song called Texan Love Song.
Yeah.
Elderberry Wine. So
Yeah.
I think that's probably the first album, and the probably Daniel and Crocodile Rock were the first 2, and then soon after that, obviously I would have heard Your Song because it
Yeah.
was everywhere on the radio, and then he had a song on Elton John, that album with Your Song's on it called, this song is an amazing song. It's called The Greatest Discovery. And it's from the point of view of a young child, probably someone like 6 or 8 years old. And his parents have just given birth to a new baby. So it's about this weird, mysterious thing about another human being coming, coming into the world. And it's just, and this is going to lead us to talking about Bernie Taupin, because that's one of the amazing things
Yeah.
about Elton John, is the sort of amazing thing about Elton John's story is Elton John, he had a music career. He was in a band called Bluesology, but he quit Bluesology and he wanted to continue and have a career. And there was a music, I guess it was a record company. I should know these details. I don't. It's a record company, and they put out an ad in one of the trade papers saying, talent wanted. So he wanted to be, a singer-songwriter. So he sent in, answered their ad and went in and said, I'm a singer. And they're like, they didn't really, think much of him as a singer. He goes, well, I also write songs too. They go, well, like, what kind of stuff do you write? He goes, well, I don't really write lyrics, actually. And so they said, well, here's a guy. And I've heard the story two different ways, that they just picked up a random envelope and they handed him an envelope, said, here's a guy who writes lyrics. Why don't you get in touch with him? I've heard it was just he grabbed it from the pile and handed it to him. I've also heard that he said, well, here is somebody who has sent us a bunch of lyrics. Why don't you see if you can do something with this? Doesn't really matter. He was an 18, Bernie Taupin was 18 years old. So Elton took this envelope that had a bunch of samples of lyrics and took it home and set it to music. And they met and they just hit it off. They liked each other. They became good friends. Bernie Taupin moved in. Elton was living with his mother, and Bernie Taupin moved in with them, lived with Elton and his mother, and they started writing songs. And I think everybody knows, even Bernie Taupin knows, that if it hadn't been for Elton John, none of us would know the name Bernie Taupin.
Right.
But I also think if it wasn't for Bernie Taupin, we probably wouldn't know the name Elton John. Now, Elton probably would have had a career as a musician. He might have even had, some hits, but I don't think he would have hit and exploded if he hadn't hooked up with Bernie Taupin. I don't think something about Bernie and Bernie's lyrics inspired him in a way to write these songs that just exploded, that I think quite possibly would not have happened with any other writer. It's an amazing story that the two of them found each other. Just the same way, it's an amazing story that Penn and Teller found each other.
Yes.
This big guy who is an amazing talker, this guy who can write and talk. I think Penn is really underrated for his ability to speak both spontaneously and great stuff he's written. And this guy who performs silently and does amazing magic, and they found each other. And and they work together perfectly. It's the same sort of thing that they found each other, and this way that Bernie and Elton found each other. I find that sort of miraculous.
So often when Bruce talks about the E Street Band, he says 1 + 1 = 3, and and I think that's true. I can't remember what show it was. It was some variety show, and they were all about. It was whoever was the host was having creative people on there, like behind the scenes. And I remember Bernie Taupin speaking the lyrics of, because, he doesn't perform.
Yeah.
And it is the magic of that. How do you get there? The sum together is greater than the parts.
Yeah.
And I agree. So have you seen Elton perform live?
I actually have. I one of the first, once I moved to LA in the late 80s, one of the first concerts I went to was I saw Elton John at, I believe it was the Universal Amphitheater.
Okay.
Of course it was great. And then, a decade later, I saw when Elton John and Billy Joel went on tour together. And I loved Billy Joel a lot in high school as well.
Yeah,
and
I did too.
I still love Billy Joel. But yeah, so I've seen him live twice. Yeah.
Yeah, because Yeah, because I was
Go
going to
ahead.
say Billy Joel was one of the surprises of when he was on Saturday Night Live and did Only the Good Die Young. I remember going, wow, who's this guy? And then when he did You're Only a Woman, I'm like, oh, okay, it's that guy on the radio. So
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
super
But
guy.
I didn't. I think I didn't discover Billy Joel until the Stranger came out.
Right.
Because he had a couple albums before that. But the Stranger came out, which was a monster album that we all in the late '70s we
Yes.
all listened to that entire album over and over and over again. And then I bought all of Billy Joel's albums. But I'm
Yeah.
going to get back to this the greatest discovery, that this song that just sort of kind of blew my mind
Sure. Yeah. Talk
because
to me.
it told this story from a point of view in a way that was kind of new to me at the time. And I'm just going to read a few of the lyrics here. And this may not, and the thing about lyrics, Stephen Sondheim, who's an amazing musical theater writer, music writer and lyricist, says the difference between lyrics and poems is that there's several differences, but one of the differences, lyrics are incomplete by themselves. They need the music to complete them. And so sometimes great lyrics, if you just read the lyrics, they kind of fall flat. And that may happen here. We'll see.
Okay.
But I'll read some. Peering out of tiny eyes, the grubby hands that grip the rail, wipe the window clean of frost as the morning air lays on the latch. A whistle awakens someone there next door to the nursery just down the hall. A strange new sound you never heard before. A strange new sound that makes boys explore. And then several more stanzas. And then it goes, and all you ever learned from them until you were much older did not compare with when they said, this is your brand new brother. This is your brand new brother. And with the sort of, wonderful lyric music lifting this, it's just a great song from that first Elton John album.
Yeah, I don't know that song, and now that I'm going to have to go check it out because I love the idea that um, the the wonder of that finding your sibling and everything.
Mhm.
So that's really good.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice. So um as as he continues and growing with him, as you said, you you're not as a big a fan now as you did. What did you think of the movie that they kind of based on his music?
Oh, you know what? I didn't love the movie. It was the same director, who did the Freddie Mercury, the
Right.
Queen movie. What was that one called? Was that called we? What was that movie called? Do you remember the one about Queen
Uh,
and
uh,
Mercury?
I'm going to draw a
Was it
blank
called
in
We Will Rock
Bohemian
You?
Rhapsody. Bohemian Rhapsody, I
Bohemian
think.
Rhapsody. Of course, it was called
Yeah.
Bohemian Rhapsody. What else are they going to call that movie?
Yes.
I thought that was a better movie.
Hmm.
Um, I appreciated uh, I appreciated a lot of the things they did with it, the way they used the music, the way they took some of the songs and sort of them injected them into his early life, even though they weren't written till decades later. And
Right.
I thought the lead actor, did a great job,
Yeah.
but the movie didn't really grab me.
Hmm.
Uh, I think it's worth seeing.
Yeah.
If you see the movie, I don't think it will be a waste of your time.
Yeah.
But you know, biopics are very difficult and often problematic.
Yeah. I agree. Um, yeah. I think there's a select few that really work, but a lot of them are, I mean, they're certainly fun. You can go and I do think if you had forgotten how much music Elton had made,
Yeah.
you go to that, you go, oh yeah, that one. Oh yeah, that one. Oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
that one, that part of it. See,
And they did a great job with the music in the movie.
yeah,
I will say that. Yeah.
yeah,
I was. It made me think there was a in the late '70s, mid probably the mid '70s. Although I might not have seen it till a little later. There was a documentary on it was made for British television, and somehow I ended up seeing it on TV in the US. I don't know how, especially with only getting, you know, 3 channels
Yes.
back then. I don't know how it would have been that this aired, and I thought, but it was a documentary called Elton John and Bernie Taupin Say Goodbye Norma Jean and Other Things.
Okay.
And it had this narration thing. And I used to do this occasionally. I would record programs because this is way before VHS and, you know, recording shows and watching them again. But I would record them on a cassette player, just the audio, and listen to it again. So I recorded this documentary about Elton John and Bernie Taupin, and it had this narration in it that I actually, without trying to, I memorized. And I would like to do some of it for you now. Because
Here we have Jack doing a dramatic reading from
yes, exactly.
the BBC documentary, please.
With a very bad hint at a British accent, because that's, you know, that's the way the narrator did it. And I don't know if this is great writing or terrible writing, because at the time I thought, oh my God, this is incredible writing. And I still kind of love it, even though it's you know, perhaps not quite as you know, genius as I think it. I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'll do portions of it, but here we go. Elton John plays cricket as he plays the piano, dressed to kill and as if his life depended upon it. For the greatest sin in his book is to be boring. At 26, he walks confidently on 5-inch heels where lesser angels fear to tread, sporting coats, hair, and spectacles of many colors, sometimes as bright and unyielding as the diamonds he wears on his fingers, sometimes plunged into self-critical gloom. 4 years, 6 million records, and then they stopped counting. 4 years of moving relentlessly across the never, never land of sudden wealth, instant fame on a train that never stops except to throw people off. As much an enigma to himself as to his friends, now possessing no inhibitions, now totally inhibited, extravagant and generous, seeking fame one moment, determined to reject it the next. Sometimes the victim of his own extraordinary talents, gifted, lonely, gifted even in his loneliness, able to cull from it another facet of his superlative musical perception, a one-off, a true original, a copper-bottom, coast-to-coast sellout, the legend he always wanted to become.
I love that. That is so good. That is amazing. You know, a couple of years ago, I do another podcast with my buddy. We talk about the British show Doctor Who, and to celebrate, we talked about, you know, Doctor Who is all about time travel, and we each picked our 5 shows we would use if we had a time machine to go back, and that first show that the movie talks about him being in Los Angeles at the Troubadour. That was one of my picks. I would have loved, because all those Beach Boys there, and the idea of, I just think that would have been amazing to see.
Okay. For those of you who don't know, in 1970, Elton's record company flew Elton over to America to do some dates. And Elton was very skeptical about it because nobody knew who he was in America. And so they booked him, I think, 6 nights at the Troubadour, which is this legendary club, you know, in Los Angeles. And he wasn't sure about this. But it was one of those things where basically that one night made his career. He became a star in America overnight because there were several music critics there, and they wrote about him, particularly one music critic in the LA Times. But all the musicians in LA came and saw Elton, and it was this legendary performance, and he just blew the roof off of the place. And that is, if I could go back and see one musical performance in time, I would probably pick one of those Troubadour performances in 1970 as well.
Yeah, I've read about that. They talked about it in the movie, and then there was a follow-up, you know, like a newspaper article that, you know, describing, and the amount of, you know, a couple of the Beach Boys were there, a bunch of other people from the California music scene, and just blown away. And I think that's That would have been cool to see. That would have been
Yeah,
very cool to see.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to say for anybody, who doesn't know Elton that well, I just want to go back and sort of, highlight those first, those albums in the first 6 years I was talking about.
Absolutely.
After Elton John, he did an album called Tumbleweed Connection, which is all, every song is set in the American West. Bernie Taupin, country kid from England, and Elton John, who grew in a, suburb of London, wrote these, 10 or 12 songs, all set, about gunslingers in the American West and farmers. And it's just like, and it's amazing. And they really capture that vibe. There weren't any real big hits on that album, but there's some great songs. And then the next one was Madman Across the Water. Amazing songs on that one, including Tiny Dancer, one of his most popular, songs. If anyone saw the movie Almost Famous, they used that song to great effect.
Almost, I mean, just iconic
Yeah.
film scene of use of music.
Yeah.
If you're going to talk about musical scenes, I think that makes most people, it's certainly in the discussion for top 10.
Yeah. Tiny Dancer, great song. Madman Across the Water title song is just great, like it's like dramatic, like a movie. That song sounds like a dark, 70s thriller movie to me. Those are the two songs that are best known from it, but it's got other great songs like Leave On is terrific. Indian Sunset, another one that could have been on the Tumbleweed Connection, which is all from the point of view of a Native American, and it's great. I imagine if they were to record it now, it might be considered problematic and cultural appropriation, but I think it's a very sympathetic,
Right.
wonderful song. Then after Madman Across the Water, Honky Chateau had one of his best songs ever. It's called Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatters. Was not a hit. I don't believe it was released as a single, but it's one of his great pop songs.
Yes, it is. I agree.
Really, if you don't know Mona Lisa's Mad Hatters, you should track it down. But Rocket Man is on this album, which is, great song. Had some funny lyrics. It's about an astronaut, and he says, "It's just my job 5 days a week." Because apparently in space you can take weekends off.
Yes, absolutely.
Another great song is "I Think I'm Going to Kill Myself," which is about a teenager, an overly dramatic teenager like threatening suicide. It's not a deep dark song about suicide. It's about a melodramatic teenager, and who hasn't had those thoughts about, when I'm gone, you'll all be sad then.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
You wish you appreciated me now. It's from that point of view. Really fun song from Honky Chateau. Then the album we talked about, Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player, which had Daniel and Crocodile Rock.
Which is a great title for an album. There's so much tongue in cheek there. That's great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And a great the photo on the album cover is fantastic. Yes. It's two kids going into a movie theater, and the movie on the marquee of the movie theater is Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player, which is great. Yeah. But then we come to Elton's masterpiece. If we could only save one of Elton John's albums, I think it would have to be Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, which is a double album. And I wouldn't say every single song on this double album is fantastic, but I would say 75% of them are masterpieces. It starts off with Funeral for a Friend, an amazing, very dramatic instrumental that goes into Love Lies Bleeding. Great song about lamenting a love affair that didn't work out. Candle in the Wind, which was about Marilyn Monroe, that then got rewritten to be about Princess Diana. amazing sort of sympathetic view of Marilyn Monroe. Benny and the Jets, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Some lesser known songs that are just great. This song has no title. Gray Seal, great song called I've Seen That Movie Too. Oh, the Ballad of Danny Bailey, which is about, you know, a gangster from the 30s, sort of a Bonnie and Clyde type album about Danny Bailey, which is just wonderful and over the top and dramatic and great. Dirty Little Girl, Your Sister Can't Twist, but She Can Rock and Roll. Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, great rocker. Roy Rogers, another Western theme. Candle in the Wind. Oh, that's no, this is from we already talked about. Anyway, that's his masterpiece is Caribou. There's a couple songs on Caribou I'd like to talk about.
Sure.
One is the song is, what is he? Oh, Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me.
Yeah, great song.
Great, dramatic, very dramatic, you know, wonderful. Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me. But he has a song called Ticking. And Ticking is, again, it's like a movie. It's about a movie about, is it, God, it's been so long since I've listened to it. I forget the story a little bit, but it's about, is it about a sniper? What is the crime this person, it's about a sniper or not a serial killer or something, but it's about, I think it's about somebody who snaps and like murders his family or something. Isn't that what it is? He murders his family. And it's about what happened in his brain, what happened in his brain that made him, make him, go insane and go on this rampage, and what happens to him.
Yeah.
It wasn't a hit single, but it's an amazing song that you should listen to. And then Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy, which is great for a number of reasons. One, it's got some great songs that most of you are probably familiar with. Someone Saved My Life Tonight is probably the biggest song on there. But it's a concept album. Wasn't the first concept album, but it was one of the early ones. Yeah. And it's all about, it's the story of Elton John and Bernie Taupin's career up to that point. And it's all about all their years meeting up, writing songs, struggling, wanting to be in show business. So it's this great sort of autobiographical song. And you don't have to know that to appreciate it, but because it is, excuse me, but because it's very personal and autobiographical, all the songs, really, really resonate in a great way. And plus the album is great. And it also came with this a souvenir booklet, which is great, which had a lot of reproductions, mementos, and a sort of a comic book about their career up to that point. It was great having that booklet to page through as you're listening to those songs. Then Rock of the Westies, which had some of his sort of more unusual songs, but what would we know from that? Island Girl was a minor hit. Oh, yeah. Another great song, again, Western themed, because Bernie Taupin of the Old West is I Feel Like a Bullet in the Gun of Robert Ford. And Robert Ford was the man who shot Jesse James in the back. Right. And it was a song about what it would be like to be, you make me feel like a bullet in the gun of Robert Ford. Really, really, great song of guilt. And then the last of that great run from 70-76 is Blue Moves, which is a double album. It has some of his most beautiful music on there. It's got some instrumentals on there. An instrumental called Your Starter 4, another instrumental called The Theme from a Non-Existent TV Show, but a song called Tonight, which is a beautiful song, sort of lamenting a relationship that's not really working. Really beautiful song. Another great song called Chameleon. And Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Word. Again, about a relationship that's not really.
It's heartbreaking.
Well. Heartbreaking. Yeah, gorgeous song. Um, yeah. Um, so those are, just wanted to cover those.
No,
If
no.
you don't know those albums from that amazing explosive period, you should
Yeah.
explore them.
Do you um when he's I believe he's touring again. Are you going to try to go see him again?
I probably will.
Yeah.
I was going to, when he announced the tour, uh, I was going to and try and get to it, and then COVID hit and it got interrupted,
Yeah.
and now, I don't know when or
Yeah.
when he'll be playing, but I will probably try to, because you know I
Yeah.
think so.
So I did want to talk a little bit. How have you done this past 2 years? I mean, when you make a living performing in front of people and you can't perform in people, how has this been this past crazy 2 years?
Well, the thing that has kept me sane, and the key thing that is, enabled me to pay rent a little bit, was what I did is I focused on writing magic books.
Okay.
I have written, before the pandemic, I had written about maybe 6 magic books
Okay.
already, and had just when the pandemic started, I had been hired to write a magic book for somebody.
Okay.
And so I went into lockdown. Um, well, I'll tell you the story. I told you I'd been teaching at USC. I was
Right.
teaching for the theater department at USC. And in January of 2020, this timeline is important. In January of 2020, I quit my teaching job at USC in order to focus on performing on cruise ships. Guess, guess what happened to that bright idea?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So
Oh,
I was on a cruise ship, was working a cruise ship the week of March 6th through March 11th. And that was the week where everything changed, where from
right.
day to day, we were like, oh, this is a thing. Oh,
Yeah,
this is serious. Oh, this is huge. Oh, this is real. This is going to be a problem for a couple of months.
yeah,
And so I got off the cruise ship on March 11th, and went home and said to myself, I'm going to have to quarantine for a couple of weeks, because I was on a cruise ship,
yeah,
and I thought I'll quarantine for 2 weeks. Well, those 2 weeks turned into 18 months. And I basically, for 18 months, or a year anyway, did not leave my apartment.
yeah.
I stared at, blank walls for a year. But what kept me sane was I was writing magic books. And I've written or worked on, in various capacities, like at least, more than a dozen books, maybe as many as 20 books. I
Okay.
didn't write them all. Some I co-wrote, some I consulted on, some I just did some heavy editing on. But I, wrote or co-wrote probably 6 books,
Okay.
and I'm, working on others. So that's what I've been doing. And so I don't know how much performing I'll be doing, because, I was going to start, like, really getting back into it heavy, start this past January, and
Yeah.
then the Omicron variant hit,
Right.
and then I thought, oh, and so I don't know when the next variant is going to hit, and so who knows? I don't know what's going on with my performing career. We'll
Yeah.
see.
Um, it's it's ironic. I got a text today from some real good friends of my wife and I, and saying, let's schedule dinner really quick before another
Cool.
wave hits.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So yeah, a similar story. I had started a new job February 10th, and I remember at the very end of February, 1st of March, I run a contact center. And so one of my agents came to me and sat down and said, Jesse, I'm really worried about this, COVID. I'm like, oh, we
Yeah,
always hear things are going to be bad, and
yeah.
it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And
How much did SARS change our lives?
yeah, exactly. Right. And then all of a sudden, uh, you know, I, we spent 2 months, isolated, working remotely. And we do roadside assistance. And if everyone's locked down, there's no one needing toes, no
Yeah.
one's breaking down.
Yeah.
And it was, it was crazy. It was just really crazy.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Now, but you did mention you do have a gig coming up, right?
I'm I'm performing at the Magic Castle next week.
Very good.
Magic Castle is this great venue in Los Angeles. It's been around for, I guess 59 years now, I believe. Great magic venue, sort of a legendary place to perform magic and see magic. And so
Yeah.
I've been performing there for whatever 25 years. So I'll be performing at the castle. I'm still a little skittish about
Yeah.
live shows and stuff, but I'll be I won't be bringing people up on stage, and
Right.
I'll be playing it safe on that level anyway.
Good. All right. So if someone wants to learn more about you, to find your books, what's the best way to do this?
Well, I would guess I don't know. I've got a website, but there's not much information on the website because I've sort of let it languish.
Yes.
I've got a website. If you're curious, it's handsomejack.com. If anybody has any questions or has any reason that they want to contact me, my email is jack@handsomejack.com.
Okay.
Very easy. Or you go to handsomejack.com and just click on the email me.
Okay.
jack@handsomejack.com.
Good.
So
Well, I love this. I now want to have you back on and we can talk roaches or Joe Jackson. That was another one of yours.
yeah,
Yeah, suggested. Yes.
yeah.
I
Well,
went through a spell where I was loving Joe Jackson. There was a
Oh,
lot of things.
I've seen Joe Jackson live 3 times. He's the only person I've seen live in concert 3 times.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I do want to talk about, maybe I don't know whether to save this for another podcast or go into it now. But I
Yeah.
want to talk about the one group that I really wanted to talk about, and the reason why I didn't pick them, even though I'm
Yeah.
kind of obsessed, is because they only ever released one album,
Okay. And who is this?
and that's the Shaggs.
The Shaggs. Okay. I have
Yeah.
not heard of them.
Okay, well then I'm gonna learn you. I'm gonna
Okay.
learn you a little bit about the Shaggs because I'm obsessed with the Shaggs.
Okay.
The Shaggs it's such an amazing story. Come with me now, won't you, to a place
Yes.
called the late 1960s in New Hampshire, USA. There was a family in New Hampshire in the 1960s, the Wiggin family, Austin and Annie Wiggin, and their 3 daughters, although they had some other kids as well. I think another daughter and a son, but it's really about the 3 daughters. Austin Wiggin, a small working class family in a small boring little town. And if you're from this town, I apologize. Fremont, New Hampshire, but it's described as sort of a sleepy little town. Austin's mother, before she died, had made some predictions. She was into fortune telling and stuff. And she said Austin was going to marry a woman with strawberry blonde hair, and she was going to have 2 sons that the mother wouldn't live to see. And that also he would have 3 daughters who would form a rock and roll band. So Austin did end up marrying a woman with strawberry blonde hair. And after his mother died, his wife did give birth to 2 sons. And so when his 3 girls were in high school, he pulled them out of school and bought them musical instruments and said, you're going to form a rock and roll band. Now, these girls had no interest in music and no musical aptitude whatsoever, but he bought them instruments, and he just forced them to play the instruments over and over and over again. There might have been some music lessons, maybe, but it would have been, not much and not extensive. It was just, play your instruments over and over and over and write songs. And so, like I said, they didn't, they liked the radio. They liked listening to, the Beatles and Herman's Hermits on the radio, and maybe the Beach Boys, but they had no real aptitude. But their father would, make them rehearse and do calisthenics, because you got to be in shape if you're going to be in showbiz. And they just played their instruments over and over and over again. And they wrote their own songs. And the music they wrote, well, I'll get to that. That because that's later in the story. And so after, I think, a year or two, after a year or two, he got them a gig playing, I believe it was like every Friday or every Saturday night at the local like VHS, no, VFW,
VFW, yes.
VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, like the, the local, lodge in town,
Right.
playing for what they would have called sock hops in those days for the local teenagers. And so they would play their songs, and the kids, because there's not much else to do on a weekend in that town, and the kids would show up and dance. And after, at one point, he said, "Okay, you ready? We're going to record." So they went to a little town, not a little town. They went to a place outside of Boston, and they were about 50 miles from Boston. And these girls had never been to Boston. 50 miles. They grew up 50 miles from, and had never been to Boston, which told you kind of how insular their lives were, because it was they weren't really allowed to date. They weren't allowed to socialize. They weren't very popular. Their dad was very, very controlling and protective. But he went to a recording studio, and the engineers of the studio, heard him play and suggested maybe they're not ready to play just
Okay.
yet. And the father said, "Nope, I want to get them while they're hot." And so he insisted that they record, and they did. They recorded all day and recorded about a dozen songs, and they pressed 1,000 albums. And very soon after that, somebody like the recording engineer, somebody disappeared with 900 of the 1,000 albums that were pressed. 900
no.
bad. Yeah. And so nothing really happened with the album, not surprisingly. But they still kept, playing on the weekends for another, 3 or 4 or 5 years. And then their father had a heart attack and died in like 1975. And then that was the last time they played. They stopped playing and they broke up after their father died. He was in his 40s and he died of a heart attack, and that was it. And they went on with their lives. Oh, to give you an idea what they were like, the oldest daughter, Helen, who played drums, when she was in her 20s, still living at home, she secretly got married in her 20s and
Wow.
didn't tell her father about it for like 3 months. And when
Wow.
she told her father that she'd gotten married, he got a shotgun and went after the guy.
Wow.
So the few albums that survived sort of circulated out into the world. And Terry Adams of NRBQ got a hold of one of the albums and would play it for everybody. And it got to be a thing that certain musicians that were lucky enough, and people would dub, cassettes of it, and they got passed around. And it is, I'm not sure if this has been verified or if it's true, but one of the legends is that Frank Zappa listened to it and said, "The Shaggs are better than the Beatles."
Wow.
But the music is unlike anything you've ever heard. It's as if aliens had never heard music and read a Wikipedia entry about music and tried to recreate what they read on this Wikipedia entry. The drums and the percussion has nothing to do with and is not related to what's going on in the music whatsoever. The rhythms are weird. The melodies are weird. The lyrics are very, crude and, amateurish.
Yeah.
And it's just like, most people just think, "Oh my God, what is this? I've never heard anything like this." And many people hate it, but many people love it, and love it not even really ironically, kind of love it for it's weird and wonderful in a way. And they wrote songs about, one of the songs is, "Who are parents? Parents are the ones who are always there for you. Parents are the ones who care for you." That kind of thing. They wrote a song about their pet cat called Foot. "My dear pal is Foot. He always likes to roam. My dear pal is Foot. He never stays at home."
wish I could find you.
And so the foot song, it starts with the drums, bum ba da dum 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 ba da ding 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 da 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 da, and the guitars come in, clang gling 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 gling. My dear friend is foot. He always likes to roam. My dear friend is foot. He never stays at home. They wrote a song about Halloween. It's Halloween. It's Halloween. And the album was called Philosophy of the World. And the title track is all about how nobody is satisfied. The girls with long hair want short hair. The girls with short hair want long hair. The boys with motorcycles want sports cars. The boys with sports cars want motorcycles. You can never please anybody in this world. It's kind of very profound when you think about it.
How did you discover
well,
them?
Well, here's what happened is when Terry Adams of NRBQ discovered it and played it around, he got the rights and they re-released the album.
Okay.
And so in 1980, Rolling Stone magazine named them the comeback group of the year, and named Philosophy of the World, one of the great albums of the year. And it's what's considered outsider music. So 5 years after the band breaks up, they sort of became, I wouldn't say they became famous, but they developed a cult following.
Okay.
And so I just imagine, from their point of view, this thing that they hated doing, they hated playing music, they hated being forced to do it. And now Rolling Stone magazine names them the comeback group of the year and one of their albums, the great albums of the year. And now they're getting fan letters from Germany and all over Europe, and from people in the United States wants to come and meet them in New Hampshire. They're like, what is going on? And, and so Austin's mother's prophecy kind of comes true, that they become famous and they don't really understand why they become famous, know what to think about, their fame, and don't really know if people, like their music or liking them ironically or making fun of them. It's all very bizarre to them. This would have been about, I don't know when exactly, 10, maybe 15 years ago. Someone wrote a musical about them. It's called Philosophy of the World. And there was a production of it in Los Angeles. And I'd never heard of the Shaggs, but a couple of my friends were in the musical. And I went and saw it. And the musical was so great, I saw it 3 times. And so, of course, I saw this musical. And so I sought out their music, because the musical, they wrote songs for the musical the way you would normally a musical, but it incorporated their music a little bit. Like in the scenes where they're in the recording studio recording their music, it plays the actors in the show playing the Wiggins sisters play the music as close as they can to the way the Wiggins sisters did, which is very, very difficult. And so I sought out their music, got their album, loved it, and I loved their story. And then there was a production of the show in Chicago, and then there was an off-Broadway production of the show. And so you can look up, you can find the cast album of the off-Broadway production. It's called Philosophy of the World. Annie Golden played the mother, and Annie Golden is probably best known for, she was in the musical of Hair.
Okay, there we go. Connection. Yes.
She was one of the main hippie chicks in Hair, and she played the mother in this musical. So if you're interested in this, I would track down the Shaggs' original Philosophy of the World album, but also track down the cast album from the musical. And you, like me, might become obsessed with the Shaggs. Oh, and Susan Orlean, the famous writer Susan Orlean, she wrote the book The Orchid Thief, that the movie adaptation is about, with Nicolas Cage.
Sure.
Yeah. And so Meryl Streep plays Susan Orlean in the movie adaptation. Susan Orlean wrote an article in the New Yorker about the Shaggs.
Okay.
Kind of after they were sort of, rediscovered. And so you can read about them there if you just do a Google search for the Shaggs in the New Yorker and Susan Orlean.
This
So,
is fascinating. What a weird, crazy story.
Yeah, it's like the music's like is like nothing you've ever heard before.
Wow.
Yeah.
I will check it out. That sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. Before we get to the Mary question, any final thoughts?
I don't. I think I've talked about almost everything that I sort of thought I was going to talk about.
That is perfect. All right. So if you're a fan of Handsome Jack and you're joining the podcast, I hope you've enjoyed him. He's been a great guest. But I end every podcast with the Mary question. Jay Armstrong is a recently retired honors English teacher, but when he was teaching, he would take 2 days his honors English class, and they would break apart the song Thunder Road by Bruce Springsteen. They would look at the lyrics, they would talk of the imagery that Bruce uses, and at the end of the 2 days, they would compare it to Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken, among other poems. Yeah. And Jay asked this class, does Mary get in the car? So, Handsome Jack, that is your question. Okay. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
Oh boy, do I have an answer to this.
Good.
I'll go on a very, very brief tangent. I will say, I, for most of my adult life, was not familiar with Bruce Springsteen's music. He was one of those guys in college, as I was learning about expanding my horizons and learned about, Tom Waits and, Frank Zappa and other musicians. I just didn't get into Springsteen. Right. And so some years back, I thought I want to learn about Springsteen. So I bought like 7 or 8 of his albums and started listening to him. And the one that really gripped me and captured me was Born to Run.
Yeah.
And I think Born to Run is a masterpiece. And I have listened to that album over and over and over again. And every once in a while, when I feel in the mood to listen to some Springsteen, I thought, you know what? I'll listen to, some of his other albums, and I'll try some of the other albums. And just none of them have clicked for me the way Born to Run has clicked, which I love. And Thunder Road is from that album. Yes. So, does she get in the car or does she not? And the reference to Robert Frost and The Road Not Taken. Everybody misunderstands that poem.
Yes.
You realize that, don't you?
Please expand.
Well, that I'll let other people look into that. But everybody, okay. It's a very interesting, subtle poem. It doesn't mean what everybody thinks it means, But maybe if you want to, I'll talk about it further on the next podcast.
Okay, sounds good.
But the poem is, most people misinterpret that poem. But anyway, so here's the way. I have several ways of answering that question, and they all lead to the same answer. Suppose you were friends with Bruce Springsteen.
Okay.
And Bruce came to you and he said, "Hey, I wrote a song that I'm pretty happy with." And he said, "Oh, really? What's it about?" He goes, "Well, it's about this girl, Mary, that I really loved. And it's about the time I thought, this is it. I'm going to win her over. So I went to her house and I just turned on the charm and I just went full out with my seduction. I said, just run away with me. Let's get out of this town. Let's hop in my car and go, and let's build our life together. Just come in and let's go." Wow, what? And so the song's autobiographical. Yeah. So what happened when you did that? Well, she rejected me and I had to walk away with my tail between my legs. Oh, so what's the song called? Thunder Road. Not Lonely Road. No, Thunder Road. Not Heartbreak Road. No, Thunder Road. Oh, thunder as in it's stormy and raining in your heart. No, Thunder Road, like the power chords of my guitar. I've got a guitar that I learned to make talk. What are you working on, a ventriloquism routine? Hello, Mr. Strings. How are you?
Yes.
No, Thunder Road, like the power chords and the big engine in my car, Thunder Road. Oh, okay. So the answer is right there in the song. She gets in that car, because the first part of the song is him, being his own salesman and making the case and saying, get in my car, come with me, let's build a life. I mean, you can criticize his approach, you ain't a beauty, but hey, you're all right. You know, maybe that's not, the most effective thing to say to a woman when you're trying to seduce her. Although you could argue that that is negging, which people will tell you negging is can be very effective.
Right.
But that song is him making the case. And so he lays it on the line and says, run away with me. And then when the lyrics start and the instrumental starts, that's the answer. That's what's happens. You listen to that. She is in that car. They are on that road. There's no two ways about it. It is not ambiguous in any way, because this song could be one of three things. It can be an ambiguous thing, like the end of Chaplin's City Lights.
Right.
If you know City Lights, which I think is Chaplin's best film, there's this woman who is blind, who through a series of misunderstandings thinks he's rich, thinks he's a millionaire. And then she has an operation and she regains her sight and she sees him for the first time. And she realizes this man that she thought was a millionaire is not a millionaire. He's a tramp, he's a bum. And he looks at her and you're like, oh my God, what is she going to do? Is she going to, embrace him? Or is she going to slap him in the face for, lying to her all this time? What is she going to do? What is she going to do? And then the movie ends and you don't know how she's going to react. The song could be that, or it could be the song of this is the time that, this is the time where, the big love affair started. This is where it all began. Or it could be a song about the one who got away.
Right.
And it's not an ambiguous did she or didn't she, like the middle of Paradise by the Dashboard Light. What's it going to be, boy? Yes or no? Yes or no? What's it going to be, boy? I gotta know. I gotta know right now. What's it going to be, boy? It's not that. It's not the one that got away song. It's this is where it all began. Now probably all fell apart, but the answer is in the music. She absolutely gets in that car and drives away.
I love it. That is a great answer. I appreciate that. That's a great answer, Jack. Very nice.
So,
Good.
so now I have to know about the people that answer. Is it like 50-50, or do most of the answers lean one way or the other?
No, it is 60% yes, she gets in the car. 40% say no.
Yeah.
Similar because she's afraid to make that choice. She, and so that's why she doesn't get in. There are people that tell the story that later she does get in. I like a couple of answers. Absolutely, she gets in the car, and when racing in the street, when she talks about she sits at her daddy's porch, that's the porch that she was dancing on. And then the one that's closest to your answer is the guy said it depends. If it's the E Street Band playing it, she absolutely gets in the car because it's that triumphant musical end. If it's Bruce playing solo, just on the guitar, and he ends with a na 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 na, that's the hero driving away because she didn't get in the car.
Yeah.
So yes, I love it. Thank you.
Great.
Jack, this was a blast. I hope you had fun. Thank you so much. Yeah, continued success. I appreciate it. You're welcome back anytime. I may reach out to you in a couple of weeks and go, okay, I've done a deep dive on the Shaggs. Now we need to talk.
Okay,
So,
great.
thank you.
Well, I had to preach about the Shaggs, and if I could just make one more convert,
I love it. That is great.
Wiki.
Very nice. All right, listeners, you stay safe. Go get vaccinated. Go get boosted. Let's all be kind to each other because that's how we're going to get through this. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, listeners. We'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. This podcast would not be possible without my wonderful group of patrons. I want to send a special thanks to John Munson, Mary Thomas, Terry Smith, Dale Hosick, Andrew Goddard, Stephen Malio, Alex Samada, Anna Lynn, Chris Bloom, Holly Mack, and Captain America, aka Steve Rogers. Thank you guys for supporting the podcast. Your support means the world to me. and you are forever in my heart.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.
It's Halloween, it's Halloween, it's time for scares, it's time for screams. It's Halloween, it's Halloween. The ghosts will spook, the spooks will scare. Why even Dracula will be there. It's time for games, it's time for fun. Not for just one, but for everyone. The jack-o'-lanterns are all lit up. All the dummies are